Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Catalyst for Change show, sponsored by Support After Abortion. I am your host today, Lisa Rowe. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the CEO for Support After Abortion. At Support After Abortion, our vision is to end the demand for abortion by impacting and healing those who have experienced abortion. We do that through three pillars. We inspire compassion among people. We help promote collaboration among leaders, and we build capacity for programming. And today we're going to be talking about programming and the importance of growing our capacity with my dear friend. She's now a colleague of mine at Support After Abortion. She's been on this amazing journey with me for the better part of 7-ish years. And so without further ado, let me introduce you to my dearest friend, Heidi Inlow.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
You're welcome. I am so glad that you're here today, and I'm really excited about our conversation. It's the first conversation of its kind on our platform, and some people might be, asking questions or interested in why we might bring that to the table. And so the topic today is miscarriage. And how it connects to abortion and how it connects to abortion healing. And so my hope and desire today, Heidi, is that through your story, through your experiences, people might come to know that there is healing, and they might come to better understand how closely aligned with abortion miscarriage really is. And so without further ado, I'd love it if you could just open us up and tell us a little bit about you personally, your family, and then maybe we'll go into your story a little bit.
Yeah. So thank you again. Very nervous. This is the first time I've ever done this. So I appreciate you just encouraging and growing me. So a little bit about myself. So I moved to Florida when I was 1. I've been married now for almost 22 years. We have 3 children. 2 are in college. 1 is junior in high school. So very busy life. I feel like life is slowing down in certain areas. But it's been crazy to walk into this new chapter of almost grown children and learning new pieces about myself now, about my marriage. It's been an interesting journey the past 2 years, just with slipping out of a little bit of more the motherhood need to more stepping into almost my own time. And what God actually has for me now. So that's a little bit about me and where I've been the past 22 years raising children, and now stepping into more, I think more of a purposeful place that He's had me for a long time, and now just placing me right where I'm supposed to be. So yeah.
That's awesome, Heidi. And so, like I said earlier, Heidi and I met, we were running together like 6 years ago, maybe a little bit sooner than that. And Heidi, you started a journey at that point. I feel so honored to have been a part of that. Would you help our viewers? Would you bring our viewers back to that place? Because I feel like so many women can relate.
Yeah. So for me, So met Lisa, was at a really low point in my life, a lot of depression, a lot of loss of identity. I was going through actually a lot of hard time with our oldest daughter, and being in a Christian family, I was really struggling. This isn't what's supposed to happen to our family. And I felt very lost. And so I think from that encounter with you that God placed, I was able to journey through this and know that it is normal. This is part of parenting. Your faith has nothing to do with this. It's normal. And, so I think sometimes being raised in a box of, culture, what Christianity is, you think that you can't be touched by hard times. And it was a roller coaster, but she's thriving. She's in college, so it was just a season. And I think that was really maybe the biggest takeaway. It's just a season. So is that?
Yeah,
I think that's about it. So yeah.
Well, I feel like her experience unraveled some of your deep roots with your own self, and watching her grow up, and it triggered some things in you.
Yes.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So I think I was a very controlling parent. A lot of fear when it came to raising my children. And so it was Hannah stepped away from some of my safety net. I felt very out of control of the safety protection of my child. And what I was able to really kind of dig into that was just my own sexual trauma that I had as a child, which I never understood that impacted the raising of my children. Because unfortunately, it was never spoken about until honestly meeting you, Lisa, and sharing deep, dark secrets that my child was struggling. To me, that was a deep, dark secret. You weren't supposed to let people in. But then as I got to unearth and just really process on a run, I learned that I was freaking out because of feeling loss of control that was triggering me from when I was 5 years old. And I had no control of it. And so that really, I used to always say I broke Hannah. I used to always say I broke my oldest daughter. But in the end, I was just raising her from a very broken place that is all restorable, And so now we don't have this perfect relationship, but we do have a very open, I can own it when I'm going back to myself, and then it makes sense how I'm parenting her. So it's been a process, man. It's been a very exhausting couple of years, to say the least.
Yeah. And it's been so neat watching you heal. And as you've healed, you've been able to be a healer for those around you, including your
Mm,
children. I am just so impressed with how you've been able to manage and find your path. Because for our viewers, we know that some of the statistics say 1 in 4 women will be sexually abused, 1 in 4 children will be sexually abused, and it correlates with the 1 in 4 who will experience abortion, 1 in 4 who will experience miscarriage. Like, I don't think that there is like that's an accident. Like, that
yeah.
statistic feels all too common, and we're going to kind of break that down today. So you carried this sexual trauma till how old were you, Heidi, when we started running? 38,
So I
37?
was, golly, so 6 years, I'm 45. So yeah, right about 38, 39.
Yep.
Yeah.
So here you are for 39 years. This was inside of you. Your family didn't talk about it. Nobody
Yeah.
talked about it. You're raising 2 beautiful girls and an amazing son. You're married to your sweetheart. Yet this is like baggage, like you've
Yeah.
had on your back. And you say it for the first time. You say it out loud. And then I believe you started walking into some healing groups. Can you say more about what that looked like?
Yeah, so that's a whole nother journey. So um, I took a position at a nonprofit thinking, wow, this is the place I'm supposed to be. My kids don't need me. I'm now going to be able to be a part of this organization that I can help these other women that have been impacted by trauma. Well, lo and behold, God's like, okay, Heidi, I need you here for yourself. So that was my first step into walking into a healing process. I actually got to get some therapy to really start the conversation. And I really believe that's where it really began to hurt really deeply, in a good, uncomfortable way. I started my journey on my own at like 38 and thought I was good to go. And then it just, yeah, that was a whole nother story. So now I'm in therapy, undigging all this crap, this sexual trauma, this divorce of my family, just all of these things. And it just opened up Pandora's box. So what do you do from there? And so from that, of course, I resigned. It just, my purpose there was to begin this journey. And then I walked into Pregnancy Solutions, an amazing organization here locally. And with that, because I was so heavily triggered by a volunteer, an older gentleman, massive trigger incident. I was just the 5-year-old again, just being reprimanded and just unseen, and huge trigger for me, which led to my first sexual healing group. I didn't even piece that together. And Lisa, I think that was you that mentioned it. Heidi, I think this is deeper than just a volunteer situation. This is someone who represents your abuser. I never understood that, Lisa. And so unwillingly, I entered this sexual healing group. I was late to my first class by 30 minutes. Avoidance is so strong, but yet at the same time, I knew I was meant to be there. So that was my first step into healing, really deep healing, being surrounded by women who have gone through similar violations that I have, and just know that my actions and my brokenness was normal. And I think that's when it began to feel normal. My controlling mechanisms, my just perfectionism mechanism, it's normal. And so that was really the first time in that sexual healing group that I began to feel normal and broken and okay with it. And then I was able to go through Unraveled Roots. Again, crazy. You enter this sometimes. I think sometimes I enter this group to learn for other people. And in the end, I learned from myself, because what I was able to experience, that even though I have siblings who went through the same childhood, their perspective of their trauma is so different than mine. So I was able to stop fighting for my voice in my family for certain things and know that their perspective is so different. So I think as I journey into each one of these, I'm able to identify more pieces about myself and know that it's my journey. And then the last one, which I never thought I would be a part of, was the Miscarriage Loss group. And this was a piece of me that very few knew about. And it wasn't something I ever spoke about or owned or thought it was part of my journey. Yeah, that wasn't the case. So then here I am in this miscarriage loss group, realizing the deep connections I have with my first child from the impact of my miscarriage, from the very first miscarriage. I did not realize how much that carried into my first daughter that I delivered. I didn't even want to hold her. And now that I was able to go through this miscarriage group, I was understanding that deep disconnection from her. And there was so much shame connected to my miscarriage. So it's just a continuing, but each group that I enter allows me to feel more and more normal, because it's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's okay. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm reflecting too, Heidi, as you navigated your miscarriage, you were in a compromised season according to the world standards,
Yeah.
right? And so the vulnerability that comes, and that's what I hope our viewers see today or hear today, is that, we have these early childhood experiences, most of us, that help to shape the way we see, hear, feel, and react to the world. And I said react, not respond. Most of us are not taught how to respond to adversity. We watch our parents react by drinking, by smoking, by doing drugs, by quieting down and not talking about it like your family. And so we end up taking on those things until we meet like that, detour in the road. And it's like, keep doing what you're doing and keep experiencing the pain, or take the other road.
Yeah.
And so here you were, having had a lot of experience with sexual abuse, being silenced, experiencing divorce, learning to quiet your voice in every matter, like don't say a word, it doesn't matter. And now you're in a relationship with your then boyfriend, soon to be husband, and tell us how the world reacted to that.
Yeah. So I used to say my miscarriage story is very different, but what I'm learning is it's very common. It's very similar to everyone else's stories. So I'm grateful that I now have that. I think that just came from the shame of it. So I was engaged. We found ourselves pregnant. Excited. I shared it with him. No one else knew our story. So with that, what happened weeks later was I began to miscarry. And so, Lisa, I did all by myself. It was, to this day, one of the worst pains I've ever experienced. I was home, not alone. My stepfather was home. And yet I still chose to do this all by myself. I couldn't trust anybody. I couldn't let anybody in. The shame that here I am pregnant. I'm a Christian. This isn't supposed to be what I'm doing. So now I'm just going to take care of this myself. And I found a doctor, got to the doctor, and that was it. And spoke with it with Adam and never spoke of it really again, unless I wanted the attention from somebody, so, but very few knew that story. So yeah.
And so much of what you just shared, and I'm so grateful I've not ever heard that part of your journey. so much of what you just shared is what I'm hearing in the group that I'm leading right now, where a woman said, it was like I went home and it was like I flushed my goldfish down the toilet. And she was referencing her baby who she had just aborted. And it feels very similar in the experience of it. I don't want our viewers to think that I'm saying that the pain from miscarriage and abortion is so similar, but there's elements of it, there's essence of the experience that do connect.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, Heidi?
Yeah. So as I'm slowly speaking more and connecting more with people, reaching out to women who I know personally been impacted by a miscarriage, a lot of shame, Lisa. Whether for me, my shame was embarrassment. Here I am, a Christian. And I'm not gonna lie, there was relief when I lost the baby, because now life goes back to normal. Now I can just continue on with my life and everything's great and nobody knew this secret. So, but what I'm also hearing is I can't do this. I'm not even a good person. What is wrong with me? So what I've been able to really see from some women is there is a lot of shame when they can't have a baby. There's a lot of what's wrong with me. Why can't my body naturally do this? Everybody else can do this. Why can't I? So I think when you compare the two, and you're right, they're two different entities. But what I've been able to really see is that emotional battle that begins when a woman miscarriage is very similar, can be very similar to the woman who's experienced the abortion. So much shame. And then there's a lot of, oh, how do I have joy at this new baby? If I hadn't lost the first one, would I have the second one? So there's a lot of these emotions that they don't know how to express because it's not spoken about. It's okay to love the firstborn child and know it's okay that you lost your first. So I think there's just a lot of shame, and I don't know how to embrace this new pregnancy. I'm afraid it's not going to last. So I'm just waiting for it to fall apart. I'm waiting for it to miscarry. Just a lot of these emotions that what I'm seeing is they have no idea how to process that, Lisa. So is that what you're asking? Did I answer that right?
You did a great job. And so when I'm listening to you, I hear the terminology that we hear so often in the medical community, reproductive loss. And so
Yes.
there's a few experiences that are kind of coupled under that terminology: miscarriage, abortion, stillbirth, and adoption. So there's 4 elements of what the world calls reproductive loss, or the medical community calls reproductive loss. And at Support After Abortion, we've come into so many conversations with women and men who have experienced abortion and sexual abuse and miscarriage and adoption and stillbirth. And so what we've chosen to do at Support After Abortion is help treat the trauma from a comprehensive perspective. So all of the groups that Heidi has gone through are all connected to Support After Abortion. You can find every single group that she's just mentioned at supportafterabortion.com through our virtual groups link. And we're encouraging others like us and other pregnancy centers and healing programs and organizations that provide therapy to bring about a more comprehensive approach to healing, because as you heard, it's layered for Heidi. Heidi, you had no idea that miscarriage was something that was impacting your parenting until you unlayered the sexual abuse. You started on the sexual healing, unraveled roots with your family. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, maybe I should attempt this group. And there you are sitting.
Yeah. And I think the important thing for me has been the most eye-opening. My miscarriage was 22 years ago. It wasn't spoken about, even the doctor's office. Sorry, this is normal, this is common. And pat you on the back and you walk out the door. Not that they did anything incorrectly. It's normal for them. And what I love that I get to say now is it's not normal for us. So it's normal for the physician to guide you that way. We're leaving broken. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Oh, we go back to work the next day, so it's one of those things that what I'm learning is from my miscarriage. The rest of my story is 3 months later, I'm pregnant again, still not married. So much embarrassment that I played with and not within my head for years. I felt stupid, but I didn't share that with anybody, not even with Adam. So here I am, pregnant now, never really processed my miscarriage, didn't share to speak it. And now here I am, stupid. How did I let this happen again? Kid you not, Lisa. I'm like, God took care of it the first time. Now look what I did. So then I was able to identify in my group. I didn't even want to hold Hannah when the doctor put her on me. And I never understood why. It's because I was too ashamed. So, and it has impacted how I've raised her, and so now I can speak about it. Now I'm like, yeah, I have 3 children. I've had a miscarriage. So I've had 4 kids, and it's so much lightness now because now I've given my child that I lost a purpose on this life. And that's the beauty that I've been able to receive from this healing group. Not mentioning the life, there's no purpose. Every life has a purpose. And now, even though mine was super young, never walked on the earth, there was still a purpose behind that sweet baby. And so now I can speak it and bring life into something that I felt dirty and shameful and stupid and embarrassed. And now, no, that one had a purpose, mighty purpose. So if that's what I can encourage from these groups, and with the miscarriage loss group, I revealed things about myself in my group that were identified to my sexual trauma. Why I went through my loss how I did was because I can only protect myself. I think that's the biggest thing. Unlayering these pieces in these groups, you slowly connect pieces, so I think that's just been really beautiful for me.
Wow. And Heidi, as you've been walking in more freedom, the light inside of you is attracting more and more women that have experienced a lot of the similar pains that you have. And so I'd love for you to share, what that's been like for you and maybe what you're seeing too as a result.
It's been overwhelming and just very humble. I don't know if I use that word right, but I've connected with a couple of friends, and just in conversations, hearing their pain and then hearing their journey. And then, a friend reached out super early on in their pregnancy and was able to share that they're waiting for basically the shoe to drop because I've had 2 miscarriages. We're not getting excited. So I think me allowing myself to know I'm broken and that's okay. It's inviting other ladies in to share their deep secrets, and even in the group, the pain that they go through, allowing them to have a space to really let that wall down has been overwhelming. And it's hard. I cry all the time. And that's the biggest pet peeve of mine is crying. But just being able to be present to let someone else share their fear and be able to say, that's normal. Normal to anticipate a loss when you've gone through this 2 or 3 times. It's normal and it's okay. So I think that's the biggest, and talking to friends who have gone through miscarriages, who've never shared it, share the depth secrets of it, because they've never had a place. So I think that's my biggest, I never thought about that, Lisa. So it's interesting you asked me that because I just doing what I do, but it is neat. It's very neat. And it's not me, it's him all day long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's your yes, Heidi, to what almost now like a decade, almost like half of a decade at least, of putting one foot in front of the other, whether you liked it or not, and really just trusting the process of healing and knowing that there's still more to come. But every time you take one more step forward, somebody else is impacted by your healing, which is such a beautiful gift.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Because it's exhausting. I don't want to not tell people that going on these healing journeys is just so fun and pleasant. They're exhausting. But I love every time with exhaustion, you always have rest.
Mhm.
So there's always a season of rest, but getting through that stuff, it's exhausting. Um, but we can so do it. And that's the thing. I never knew I had the power, not power, but the strength to talk about certain things. And I'm not gonna lie, it's still a struggle with my family, and I think it's just the constant, and it's okay, because it is normal, So
Mhm.
I think yeah, it's exhausting, but so worth the journey.
Wow. And as you've been on this journey, you've been able to recognize some of the strengths of the journey, right? And the
Mhm.
resources that have been super powerful for you, but you've also noticed some of maybe the weaker points. And one of the things you shared with me recently is, Lisa, there's just not a lot of support for those women and men who've experienced miscarriage. Can you tell our viewers what you've
Yeah.
really been able to experience?
Yeah, and let me just real briefly, because I haven't mentioned men a lot, so I do want to make sure that that is heard. Um, Men hurt just as deeply, and the really sad thing is there's hardly anything for that. It's a miscarriage. It's just the woman. It impacts the men just as heavily. So I am so glad you went back to that. Um, I think what I as I'm researching, there are books. So I don't want to not say that there's not books to journey through this. What I've heard is there's just not a lot of resources for this specific. You can bring God into every book. You can do this, you can do that. But I think what's missing is the clear conversation books. You know, this is what happened. How did it affect you? Um, the resources just aren't, from my perspective, haven't been strong enough to really have that direct conversation of really what has happened. Um, I don't know if that makes sense because there are books out there. Um, they're just so long. It's like you get a book that's 250 pages long and it's like, oh, and it's reliving it every page. Every page you're reliving it. So that's one area that's really lacking from my perspective is just curriculum that's really geared directly for this reproductive loss, miscarriage loss. There's not a lot of resources. And then the other part is just educating the medical field. So the OBGYN, however you say the office is, it is normal for them. Statistically shows this is a normal process. Um, if we could just sit and talk and just collaborate with them a little bit more to get in their offices a pamphlet that we can hand, because it's not normal for that woman or for that man. So if they knew that they had a place to call and that they had a place to express what was happening, golly, maybe it wouldn't be 22 years. Maybe it would be a month down the road. So I think that's such a pivotal piece is getting those connections in our community and creating just a resource that's going to be very specific. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so, what I hear you saying is more of a beginner level or an entry level way of discussing miscarriage and beginning the healing journey. Oftentimes, what we find with our healing material is that it's expansive, and it's rightfully so. People don't want to start something and not finish, right? What they
Yeah.
started. They want to take you through the whole process. They want to make sure that whatever pain you started with, that you really have the coping skills. But like with abortion healing and with sexual healing, like we need an entry point. We need a
Hmm.
place to just name it, right?
Yeah.
And to say, listen, you're not alone. Let's just name this and know that there's a next step for you. This is step
Hmm.
one. And what I'm hearing you say is there's not really a step one right now.
There's, from what I've seen, there's not. And we have a great resource that we're able to use right now. Um, so there are some out there, but right now, there's just not a lot. Where do you
Yeah.
go? Google miscarriage loss books. You won't find anything,
Mhm.
so that's, well, you may find something. So that's what is missing because it's, you don't want to go through a 30-week thing. It's what can I do to help myself right now? And then when I have a better grasp on what's going on, okay, what's the next step? But yeah, just what
Mhm.
you said, what can be very specific for that step one. So, but yeah, for
That's so
sure.
good. Yeah, and we've partnered with an organization called Life Perspectives,
Yep.
and they have a great step one. And if you're interested in learning more, Life Perspectives is the name of the organization, and they have a website. And Miscarriage Hurts is the book that they have. I think that that might meet the needs of quite a few people. But what you're
Yes.
saying is there's just not much outside of that,
Yes.
and that we really need to call on the hearts and minds of people that have been called to do that, to
Hmm.
take a step forward and do that. And I know you're feeling a little ignition in your spirit to take the next step. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what's kind of
Yeah.
inspiring you?
So I think for me, I'm not a writer or author by any means, but I have just that has sparked within me. And so what has really formulated over this past week is who in my realm has the capacity. And there's a few women. So and that's how to at least get it started, so just pulling on the women that I know God's placed them in my life. And so they're just to get that going, the conversation started, because that's what has to happen is a conversation. And then from that conversation, what's next? So I think I've been hiding this for a little bit because it's big. Um, but it stays right here. So I know it has to move forward. So whether that is just getting something, I don't know, but there is this yearning to get something. And I know there's some ladies, and I've prayed very specifically that it can get accomplished. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm not an author, God. I'm not. It's not who I am. But I think what has ignited in me, Lisa, is it's a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
This healing book for miscarriage loss and just listening to women share, it's life altering, so, and then we could get it into the, these doctors out, it's just, yeah, I'm a dreamer if y'all can't tell, so just God has it put in me to write something needs to get written. So yeah, so
Well,
a
we're
couple
going to be
girlfriends maybe
spurring you
getting phone
on.
calls.
Yeah, we're going to be spurring you on because I am thrilled at all that's going on in and through you, Heidi. You're an inspiration to women. If a pastor's listening or a women's director's listening, I think it's really important that people understand that Heidi's story is all too common. A
Mm,
church going woman led by church going
mm,
parents was sexually abused, it was ignored, and then it led to so many different things as a result. And there again, miscarriage was kept quiet and kept quiet for 20 years. And so I just hope that leaders in our country and across our world would hear that 25% of abortion of women that are having children find themselves in an abortion clinic.
mm.
25% of pregnancies right now land in miscarriage. So if we don't look at the overlap, but maybe look at that as like a continuum, that's 50% of the women
Mhm.
childbearing age in our congregation that have been impacted by reproductive loss,
Mm.
not to mention stillbirths and foster care and adoption that also impacts that. So if we're not talking about this topic from the platform, educating our families, giving them permission to bring these up with their children and have conversations and the tools to do that, we're missing a huge mark.
Yeah. Yeah. So good, Lisa. And that's, being raised in church, I don't know any different. I don't know what decisions would have been like outside the church because, I was in church in the womb, so for me, this is the only life I've known. Um, and it never got spoken, and so how do you handle it if you haven't, not that the church raises me by any means. But when you're not hearing it from the front, how is it normal for when it impacts you? So relevant for that, having that, getting the language to be part of our culture is pivotal because there are women and men, their families hurting because they can't have the baby that's sitting right next to them that somebody just had, but they're coming to church, they're smiling, so how do we help that to become part of our everyday conversation? So yeah, so good, so good.
Hmm. Well, Heidi, I am so glad that you were a part of this conversation with me today. Your boldness and your healing journey are super inspiring. I'm grateful to be your friend, and I love that you've joined forces with us at Support After Abortion. And I just can't wait to see all that God's going to continue to do
Oh,
through you and for you and your family.
oh, well, I think I'm honored to be here and just very overwhelmed where he has placed me. Truly overwhelmed by it.
And thank you for joining us on this journey and watching the Catalyst for Change show or listening through our podcast. If you are interested in learning more about how you can become a catalyst, join us at supportafterabortion.com.